right, I think we'll start now. So hi everyone, welcome to Virtual Realities. Thanks for joining us on a student-led conversation about the realities of remote working. This is the last event of the year of our SALA Professional Development Series, which included the portfolio reviews and firm connections. And our agenda for tonight will start with a brief introduction of the panelists, and then a discussion period where Gabriella will ask a question chosen from a previous Instagram poll. And then the panelists will share a few of their thoughts and experiences, and it should last just under an hour. So afterwards, we'll have an open Q&A. So feel free to drop in questions into the chat anytime, and we're gonna address them at the end. And so if you want, you can keep your videos on, but we're just gonna spotlight the panelists' videos until the Q&A period. So today we have current students and recently graduated alumni on our panel. So we'll dive into the introductions, starting with Emily Wildebong. Can you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Emily. I'm in my second year of my Master's of Architecture at UBC. I'm currently working part-time for a very small firm here in Ontario. Our principal architect used to work at a large firm, but then she left to kind of start her own practice. And I started working with her in May of 2019, which obviously was pre-pandemic. So we had to make the shift from working in the office to working remotely from home. So hopefully I can offer some insight into that transition and kind of those two different experiences of working.
Next, we have Jesse Martin.
Hey, I'm Jesse. So I graduated from Master of Architecture at SALA back in May of last year. Since then, I've been working for a Vancouver firm called MGA, Michael Green Architecture. Prior to SALA, I did undergraduate degrees in architecture and art history in Toronto and Halifax, so at University of Toronto and Dalhousie University, and worked for a few offices in Toronto and in Halifax. So yeah, happy to talk about work experience, different places, and differences between working remotely versus in office, and any school/work questions, happy to talk about.
And Jessica Udal.
Hi, I graduated from the MLA program last May, same cohort as Jesse, or same time. And since August, I've been working for a small firm. Well, yeah, like similar to Emily, it's somebody who went out on their own after working at a bigger firm. And it's two different women I've been contracting for, and they're actually coming together to start a firm very soon. So that's been a pretty unique experience, and happy to talk about contracting and what that's like.
And Josh Fender.
Hello. I'm Josh. I'm second year MLA. I'm zooming in from Kelowna, BC. I think I'm the only SALA person here right now, so it's been a bit isolating, but I've made the best out of this tough situation.
And Kristina Kolosova.
Hey, I'm Kristina. I'm a current Master of Architecture student, and it's my second year. Well, it's my first year. I'm just a EP student, and currently I'm working for a company that does architectural rendering. So it's not really typical setting, but last spring/summer I was working at a local company here in Vancouver, and it was like half remote, half in person. So I'm happy to share that experience since it's more relatable to most of us. Yeah, and looking forward to chatting with you.
All right, Surabhi Shakkarwar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Surabhi Shakkarwar. I graduated from the Master of Urban Design program in November 2019. And I worked at a couple of architecture offices. I worked at Human Studio architecture and urban design, which is a couple of people from Dialogue starting their own firm, similar to Emily and Jessica's experiences. And then now I'm working at a company called Engage Architecture, which is also someone coming in from a larger office. And we're just three of us. So it's a really small workspace, like really small office, quite a large workspace actually. And we work on multifamily housing. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about any of that. Thank you.
Great. And then we have Tosin Odugbemi.
Hi, my name is Tosin, and I attended the Bachelor of Environmental Design program and graduated it was last year now. And now I'm doing my master's at the GSD, and I currently do interior design and graphic design for my own business, but have interned at firms in the past. So happy to talk about working at a firm or working for yourself, or a master's if you're still doing your undergrad.
Thank you. So now I'll hand it off to Gabriella to start off the discussion.
All right, sounds good. So we can start with the first question. What are some positive changes that have occurred since the switch to remote working? And Kristina is going to start us off.
Hey, yeah, so obviously there have been positive and negative changes. And I was thinking about it, it should really be, every company should be looked at on case-by-case basis. So for example, one of the most popular advantages is that you can apply to any company in the world now. But the reality is that architecture is that field that's so tightly connected to your location. Not only you have to know the policies and climate, market, stuff like that, you also have to be able to go to the site visits. And from my experience, even if you don't need to go to the office, your employer will likely want you to be close by the office for like cases such as like going to the site visits or coming into the office for a meeting, choosing materials or something like that. So in Vancouver specifically, I know that Brewery Architecture, they are functioning fully in person right now, despite the pandemic. And most offices, such as HCMA, for example, or where I used to work, WA, it's half and half. So for example, you do drafting or something like that at home, like production work at home, but you have your meetings in person. Rare cases, you have full remote work. I know Dialogue, they're fully operating online right now, but that's because they had a pre-existing system for that, just because they have many offices around Canada and they had some people that worked remotely even before the pandemic. So I would say that before you apply for a job, you should do your own research, and there's a high chance that you would not be working remotely 100% of the time. So there's that benefit, I guess. Maybe you will be able to work somewhere, like be located somewhere else, but work for a company somewhere far away. I'm sorry, they do fire testings. Yeah, another benefit is that your work schedule becomes more flexible now, and that's true. Management now is more understanding of people's needs. So in case you need to walk your dog for a couple of hours in the afternoon, they will be okay with that. But there's a trap that I faced. If you start having inconsistent schedule, it is expected that you're available at all times, and they will be calling you all the time, and you're expected to work at all times. So it's better to stick to your 9 till 5 schedule to set that boundary, so that you can predict your people can predict your schedule. And another thing that's beneficial now actually is that communication became way more effective. For example, messaging on Teams, like collaboration, casual conversations, they became so much more effective because you can send a message and it will always be responded to you. Whereas in person, if you had a question and you wanted to go ask your colleague and go to their desk, there's a high chance they're on a phone call or they're busy or something like that. And now they will always find a moment to respond to you. So that actually improved just collaboration, and all of the questions are now answered. Same with Zoom calls. Now they're shorter, like the meetings are shorter, they're more organized, they are more effective. So I think the biggest change that was positive with remote work is that work became more flexible, more understanding, and more efficient. Yeah, I see there were some questions. Should we answer them later?
Yeah, we'll answer them at the end. Thank you, Kristina. That was really great. Does anyone else want to add from the panelists? All right, we can move on to the second question. Are there any new tools you are using, or are you using any old tools differently because of the switch to working remotely? And Josh is going to answer that one.
Yeah, I kept it I'm keeping it pretty brief, but also really simple. So taking lectures online, I was finding was really not engaging. And so I made the switch to taking notes virtually. So I set up my Zoom channel, and then I have my one notebook right beside, and I use the snipping tool to capture, lecture slide imagery and notes that I can't type so fast, because I'm finding that with the online lectures, a lot of the time the content's covered so quick and you don't have time to write it down. So I'm pretty much like recording key moments using the snipping tool. And I'm actually using the snipping tool too to share screenshots of my work, my CAD work or Rhino work with my partners in my groups, group projects. And it seems like, yeah. And then aside from that, we're using Miro, right? And I'm finding that group meetings are actually more effective just over a call, whether it's Facebook or WhatsApp or another app, just having a headphone in and talking and then going right on the Miro board rather than like screen sharing. I find screen sharing really slow. It's really awkward if you try and annotate on top of a screen. But on Miro, it's all live and you can see each other floating around. Yeah, those are my two like hidden, but really simple tools that I've been using on and on. And then aside from that, new tools, I'm starting to explore hand drawing, but digitally more. So I got a tablet recently, doing a lot of sketching digitally. It just makes sense with everything being online to do a quick sketch and then plop it into Miro rather than having to scan or take pictures of hand drawings on paper. And yeah, I think that's basically it, but I'm sure other panelists have tools they can talk about.
Great, thank you, Josh. Yeah, does the rest of the panelists, do you guys have any other tools to add? Or Josh mentioned kind of how meetings have been a bit more productive now that they're virtual. Have you guys felt the same way?
I definitely have. And I mean, now I think, especially with client meetings, if the clients are okay with it, you can record the meetings, and it's actually really helpful to just watch the recordings. You make sure you're kind of getting all of the clients' points that they wanted in the first place, instead of trying to pay attention and like jotting down notes and then trying to be there in person. So I think that kind of extra added like record of a client meeting has been super helpful when you like go back to actually start designing what they want. So yeah, I think that kind of goes off of what Kristina was saying about really streamlining the meeting process.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I would like to add to a couple of things about the tools Josh said. Over the summer, I was working with Urbanarium, and we were trying to develop a community engagement tool. And we pretty much did that. Like we used Mural and screen sharing via like, drawing on your iPad and sharing your screen. And it worked really well because different people can discuss while one person draws. And I think the same might apply to like group work or even like working in offices. So I've shared the Instagram page for Urbanarium if anyone would like to take a look, because the outcomes are really nice when it's live drawing and discussing ideas at the same time. So if that's valuable, thank you.
I'll just add, similar to Josh, snipping tool is actually super effective just to like screenshot something and do a quick drawing over it. At MGA, we use Slack pretty nonstop. So I'd never used it before, but it's actually a really effective communication tool. It's kind of like adult MSN Messenger, like in today's era, but it's really nice to be able to just chat and ask quick questions rather than having to compose an email or make a phone call. So there's kind of constant dialogue on Slack, and then we'll just Zoom and check in and have meetings on Zoom, which has been fine. But I think having some sort of communication device that's less formal and easier to just sort of quickly talk about things is really effective.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like Dialogue and WA, they use Teams, Microsoft Teams, often for like that casual talk. And because you don't need to like create this formal email, it just like eases the conversation so much. The company I work for right now, the rendering one, we use Telegram. It's not really popular in North America for some reason, but it's another tool, messenger, that's also really good.
Great, thank you, everyone. All right, we can move on to the third question. Which tools / experiences do you wish you had access to or had learned about? And Tosin will be answering this one.
Yeah, so like part of the reason I didn't type in was my tools for the last question because I knew I had to save them for this question. But I think that there's definitely been a heavier emphasis on drawings in the online design world than there was when, you know, things were happening in person, which I'm sure y'all are experiencing right now. But because I was somebody who did my entire undergrad in person, there was such a, you know, heavy emphasis on physically modeling, and, you know, so much of your project was that. And so I guess, like, had we known that COVID was coming, I wish that I had like dived more into like how to represent something spatial on a screen that's very two-dimensional. And I think that that's just a tool that like just everyone should become really great at using, because even after, when things are in person, like it's still good to be able to represent your ideas in many different ways, like conceptually through like more diagrammatic drawings, and also like with proper conventions and things like that. And so that's something I've been definitely learning very quickly, and just like some more practical and like less conceptual tools. At the GSD, we've been using, like, of course, like all the Miro and Zoom and stuff, but apart from that, we use this app called Modelo, which I can put in the chat as soon as I'm done talking, which is a way that you can put like your 3D models. I don't know if you've been using it, Sala, but it's like a way you can put your 3D models like on this little thing, and everyone can like walk around it. It's really cool. So if you Rhino model something really awesome, then you can use that for your presentation. And also just like leaning more into animations and like learning how to use After Effects and making GIFs in Photoshop if you haven't done already, or like learning how to use Bongo for Rhino, or like Enscape. Video walkthroughs can be really helpful too. And I think it's actually kind of an opportunity, because when you're presenting things in person, usually showing a video is a little awkward, but when you're online, it's actually really great to show a video. So I think that you can kind of like take the time that you would have spent laser cutting and gluing together a model, and instead like put it into learning some of these other tools, which are actually going to help you in your career later, pandemic or not.
Great, that's awesome. Thank you, Tosin. Does anyone else want to add?
It's not that, but I think it's a really good point about just having being able to sort of represent your ideas and your work through a different medium is becoming like such an important thing now, right? Because you can't have people stand up and look closely at your drawings. So really, you're in control of what you're showing. And I think having done thesis, having to switch to the pandemic during thesis and then watching thesis projects that followed, it was like a very clear difference in how people's work, I think, started to evolve and became sort of geared towards like digital media and how to represent ideas through their narrative through like slideshows and things like that. So I think it's just a good point in general, in that it's like another skill set of developing ways to represent your thoughts that we're having to kind of adapt to now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Jesse. All right, we can move on. Is there something you wish you knew before you started working remotely? And Emily will take on this one.
Yeah, so I guess kind of just how much the work could actually be done from home, which, you know, has its advantages and drawbacks. Because a lot of our work uses digital software, so CAD and Revit and Adobe, it was relatively easy to make the shift to working from home. So with a laptop that had remote access to the company server, I had access to all the files I needed, and it was easy enough to work on these projects from home. So I think it proved that a lot of the work could be done from home at the same level of efficiency without having to spend time and gas commuting back and forth to the office. It was also nice to take that extra 20 minutes in the morning that would have been spent traveling. But at the same time, I really started to miss the commute into the office, because that was a clear separation between work time and rest time. So pre-pandemic, it used to be that no matter how late you had to stay at the office working on a project, you always had that kind of light at the end of the tunnel that was driving home at the end of the day. And when my living room became a work zone, when it was previously meant for relaxing after the workday, I found it increasingly difficult to switch off after the workday. So, because these spaces blended together. So that's definitely something I am still working on, and I'm sure a lot of students and people working remotely are experiencing this as well. A really helpful way for me to look at it was to really focus on actively setting those boundaries myself, which I think I knew before, but I didn't realize how rigorous I had to be to maintain those boundaries. So like things like dressing like I was going into office, even though I wouldn't be in the office, and setting aside a specific area just for work. So I've been slowly realizing how important those boundaries are to maintain productivity, and more importantly, like a healthy state, healthy mental state. So I mean, I'd be interested to hear everyone's general thoughts about kind of the work-life balance, with work being so close to you all the time, and how you're separating or not separating the two. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, or kind of things to recommend for people struggling with that separation.
Yeah, I found it's interesting, like working from home and seeing how much time is billable, and then how much time in a workplace you actually spend, you know, chatting to colleagues or doing other things. I find that to be quite, yeah, just like revealing about what work like looks like, and how much time you can actually spend doing your tasks. So I think, like, obviously there's a bit of trial and error in figuring that out, but I think once you figure that out, that can help you be able to set those boundaries a bit more, and like know how long things are going to take you to do, and how much time in a day you're actually going to be able to dedicate towards it. So I think like paying attention to that is a good thing to do, and then yeah, kind of understand what your limitations are around it.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you, Jessica and Emily. Those are great thoughts. Yeah, even as a student, it's already hard to separate student life and life. So I can't even imagine adding an extra layer and working on top of all of that. So that was a really good point. Anyone else has anything to add?
I think also in some ways, working from home, you sort of, it can be positive in that there's less stress of sort of work environment, and maybe people you don't know or situations you're not comfortable with. So sometimes it can be effective in that if you have your setup, that you can really focus and you know, not get stressed out by other things. It is quite strange though, working with people and seeing them daily on Zoom, but knowing that I've never met them in person and maybe wouldn't even recognize them on the street. So it's just a weird layer of the world we're in now.
Yeah, I think there, like in the future, there's definitely going to be a hybrid between the two of like working at home and then working in the office, because there's totally benefits to both. And I think in the future, there's kind of going to be a best of both worlds, where you have kind of the best of the independent working space in a space that you're comfortable, and then kind of the other sides of it being an in-office collaboration where you can kind of share ideas in person and kind of be in that like hive mind location, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Like when I worked in the summer, I actually preferred to work in the office just because you could get into that mindset. Whereas when you're at home, you tend to just like keep working. So more like studying from home, I realized how important it is to take breaks. So in the office, you would go to like chat with your colleagues or something like that. That would be your break. But at home, you don't have anyone to talk to. So maybe you just like encourage yourself to take those breaks, and maybe they should be a little more positive. Like, for example, maybe like a quick like 10 minutes yoga session or something like that. Not just like staring at the phone. They help so much, and you kind of have to enforce that on yourself just to keep that like positive mindset.
Great, thank you, Kristina. All right, moving on. When is the appropriate time to search and apply for a job online? And Jesse is taking this one.
Sure, I think, well, similar to some of the previous comments, I think the state of offices now is that they've pretty much all, I think at this point, come up with sort of a workflow in the pandemic time. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, the kind of struggle of not knowing kind of if offices are going to hire or how they're going to hire is probably a bit in the past. Like I think most offices have some strategy moving forward now. So I think at least that hurdle's overcome. And from sort of chatting with different people, it seems that it's all case by case basis, but a lot of the smaller firms, I think, are operating in office. Like some of the like sort of 1 to 10 people firms have staff in the office, and some of the larger firms are sort of rotating people in and out or just having remote workflows. So there's at least like some sort of layer of normalcy that I think is happening now that you don't have to sort of stress as much about. But in terms of applying, I don't think much is different than what it would be prior to the pandemic. So it depends on your situation. Like I'd say if you're looking for work in the summer, you want to start applying now and start sort of getting in contact with people. But in architecture, it seems it's really just kind of timing and luck of the draw. Like depends what kind of work an office has, if they have sort of new clients coming in, and it's really difficult for most offices to forecast, you know, several months down the line. But my advice would be just in general is just start building a network of people you know, or people that you want to get in touch with, and sort of reach out by email sooner than later. And I think similar to like the firm handshakes and those events, like if you get someone's, I mean, I know it's not in person now, but if you get someone's business card, you can always contact that person directly rather than sort of just blindly kind of sending an email to HR, because those get sort of funneled through whatever system. But I think my advice would be, if you're graduating and looking for work, is to, I personally took a bit of time to just sort of decompress and really work on my portfolio and decide sort of what I'm looking for in a job. Because I think once you graduate and you start looking for work, you want to really find somewhere that suits you and what you're looking for, because, you know, you might not get that kind of break between school and work again. So my advice is take some time, really make your portfolio as nice as you want, and be okay with just sort of feeling out what's available and what sort of options there are, and talk to different firms and different people. And the best way in somewhere is to really know someone that works there or have some connection. So it's like, it sounds kind of, I don't know, you hear it all the time, but you got to just sort of make those sort of connections, or it's easier anyways. But yeah, so in terms of when to apply, yeah, depends on the scenario. Sooner the better, and just keeping a line of communication open, I think, is always helpful with firms that you want to work for. And I think also if you're in the MArch and you decide you want to get licensed, then you'll have to get a mentor. So, I mean, one way to sort of look for a mentor is look for somewhere that you like their work or that you might want to work in the future, and you can sort of reach out to them. And then that's sort of another branch of communication you've got open. So that's a really effective tool in the mentorship process when you try to get licensed. So happy to hear everyone else's thoughts on timing and things like that. It's hard to really say because, again, I find it's really just luck of the draw.
I agree with all of that, Jesse. I feel like, except for taking a break, like once you're ready to apply to things, it's always the earlier the better. Like, you know, if you're looking for a summer internship, sometimes by February, March, like those positions are taken. Not to panic anybody, but it's like, you know, it's always the earlier the better, because you want to be one of the first. If they have 10 positions to fill, if you're applicant number 1, you probably have a better chance than if you're already applicant number 32.
Yeah. One thing that I feel is more challenging in the virtual world is networking. It's definitely like more difficult to just meet people, interact with them, and understand what's going on in different offices, just to determine, you know, like what kind of a place you'd like to work in. So I think a good idea would be to, you know, like keep on the lookout for, you know, various organizations like Women in Architecture in Vancouver, or Urbanarium, or the Urban UDI, ULI, and, you know, try to attend their virtual events. And, you know, that might be a good way to build more connections when you're looking to find a mentor for registration too. That might help. Yeah.
I think too, it'll probably lead into the next question, but in my experience looking for jobs in the summer, there were some offices that I interviewed digitally and some that were in person. So again, kind of different options out there, and totally agree with networking being a little bit more difficult now. I don't know if there's people using LinkedIn nowadays a lot more, I guess. So things like that, or the digital networking now.
I think like asking people to introduce you is one way to kind of get around that. Like, I mean, obviously they would have to have that connection from before, but I think just like having somebody connect you in an email or however, yeah, is a really good tool.
Yeah, definitely. Like reaching out to your professors and asking if they know someone, kind of stuff.
There's also that little added benefit of like, now that everything's online, distance won't hold you back. So you're not restricted to only grabbing coffees with people who are local to you. Like, I know I've been, you know, like at the GSD, it's a US school. And so a lot of the people I've been connecting with are so far away, and it's fine because we can just hop on a Zoom call and that's the norm. So there's like some silver linings to it as well, but it is difficult searching for a job at this time.
Yeah. I also find that it's easier to connect with people over like a shared interest or a shared project, or, you know, something that you're doing. So if, you know, say you're out of school and you have a couple of months that you're planning not to do something in terms of a job, it's helpful to just stay involved with something, or, you know, participate in a little competition with your friends or something. And then through that, try to connect with people and, you know, ask them questions about it. I found that useful in my previous job search.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same, that networking is so key. And actually, I don't know, I think that getting into those events about architecture is easier right now because obviously it's online and you don't need to travel anywhere. So for example, like if you're interested in Passive House, their meetings happen every Wednesday, I think. And so through that, they actually have like some like talk sessions so that you have an opportunity to talk to professionals, and maybe through that you can meet new people and make new connections. So yeah, I think you just have to keep thinking positively and don't think that online world really restricts you. Like there are still so many opportunities.
Great. That's great advice, everyone. And the next question, how do you make an impression during a virtual interview, which we kind of led up to? And Surabhi is answering this one.
Oh, yes. So with regards to making a good impression virtually, I'd first like to start off with apologizing. I've had a bit of a day, so I've been feeling not the most grounded since in the first 15 minutes of this call, but I'm here now. And I did give this a bit of thought because I had to do a virtual. I got the choice same between a virtual and an in-person interview back in October. And I just chose a virtual just because I was like a little panicked about COVID. But I just thought back about all the things I did to prepare for it, and I spoke about it to a couple of people. So I have a few pointers that I put down, and I hope they're helpful. So the first basic set of things would be, test your technology, dress like you would dress for a regular interview, setting your camera right, all of this logistical stuff that would show up for any tips that you look up for a virtual interview. Another thing I realized was to show up early. Like for a regular interview, you would travel and you'd plan to be there 10 or 15 minutes early. You'd wait in the lobby, and all of that just gives you some mental settling time. So if you can do that for a virtual interview, just sit in front of your computer a little bit early, have your portfolio pulled up and ready, and just be there for like 10 minutes when you know everything's done, but you're just like sitting and decompressing. And another little thing I realized, sometimes in virtual interactions, you can have awkward silences, or like you're in there and the interviewer's in there too, and like there's a bit of a silence. So if you're the kind of person who's good at filling up those silences, then that's good for you. But if you're not, then just try to think of, just be like, oh yeah, I'll go in and be like, how was your day? Or, how's the weather? Something like that. If you're not the kind of person to fill in the silence, then think of a couple of like small talk questions to ease yourselves and make the interviewer comfortable, because that will also help establish a connection, which is more difficult virtually. And then, oh yeah, with regards to awkward silences, it could also be like, like say you're making a note of something during the interview. It's always helpful to just be like, yeah, I'll just write that down, because a lot of body language is not generally conveyed in a virtual interaction. So that might be helpful. And practice presenting your portfolio online. I find that it's very intuitive to us as architecture students to just point at a paper and explain. But when it's on a screen, it's something that puts us a little bit out of our element. So like with a friend or someone, practice like getting on a call, sharing your screen, putting up your portfolio. And I think it's helpful to also think of how long it would take. So just assume a scenario, say it's a 45-minute interview, then maybe you'll get 10 minutes for your portfolio. So think of how you'd say what you want to say in 10 minutes. And if you find yourself going over time, then what project from your portfolio you might eliminate. I found that exercise quite helpful in my experience. And then finally, if there are some technical drawings in your portfolio, I think that's where more thought might be required to how like zoomed in or at what scale they might be shown. And also, I think just a general way to make a good impression in an interview is to always ask questions. So it shows that you've done your research and you're interested in their company and you're curious to learn more. And it helps to think of an interview also as a two-way process. And, with the virtual interview, it's kind of not the best that you don't get to go into the office and see how it feels and then decide if you like it or not. So that is an element that's a little bit different, but, like try and find out about the company and how the work culture is from connections, or try to find out from the interviewer through the call. And finally, the most cliched thing that we usually hear, which is to like just be yourself and be authentic. I think that always helps, because it'll just get you hired in a place where you're a good fit. And yeah, that's all from me.
That's great, thank you. Does anyone else want to add to that and their experiences with virtual interviews?
I don't have any experience with virtual interviews, but as far as the presenting your portfolio online, I think you're not limited to paper anymore. So I think you can kind of use other media if you want to present your portfolio, like video or animation. There's a lot of cool things you can do and kind of tailor it to your job interview. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff you can get into, or just like on Miro, kind of like that interactive where they can like zoom in and out on their own rather than you kind of guiding them through like a slideshow. But yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think what we've done on Miro, like showing our progress work and sort of our thought process, is actually a very valuable thing to show a firm. I know in my experience, the firm I applied to, they quite liked seeing that. It's a unique thing, so don't delete your Miro. Just keep it in mind.
I'd say too, it sounds silly, but curate sort of your background and what's seen in your camera, because I mean, it gives a good talking point. Like I find, even if the rest, like it's like the one curated corner you might have in your apartment, but like for me, someone will ask like, what's like going on in the background? What's that model? And it's just something easy to talk about. And it's just like something that helps sort of help with the conversation, and could just be another way of even displaying your work if you really want. And I'd say similar to the remarks before, that be okay with just asking lots of questions about where you want to work and like what their process is like there, like what they're looking for out of you. And one thing I always ask is what software they use. Even though most offices are comfortable sort of training you, there's certain software that I prefer using to others, that it's not so much that I only want to use that software, but I know that what my comfort level would be with using that software, and what kind of workflows they have that might work better with you and how you like to work.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, thank you. All right, and last but not least, what advice would you give to students who are looking for a job during the pandemic? And Jessica is taking this one.
Yeah, I think one thing to think about is like looking in non-traditional places. My experience has been contracting, and I think that makes for lots of different possibilities. It means that like you don't necessarily have to look just like at a big firm or even somewhere that has posted, like you can even offer your services as a contractor. And yeah, I think that's a good thing to look into. I think also, I mean, we've talked about this before, but just like reaching out and exploiting your network. Like ask anyone you know, like professors, colleagues, friends, classmates, whatever. Yeah, just like dive into that, get people to introduce you, send emails. Because at the end of the day, it's really about, yeah, I think those kind of connections. Thirdly, I think a really important thing to do is to think about like what your values and your priorities are in work. I think we touched on this already, but like, are you looking for certain kinds of experiences or certain projects? Like, is lifestyle more important to you? The location? So I think like knowing that about yourself and knowing like what kind of work you want to do and what you want your life to look like as a worker is yeah, a good thing to know. And of course, like that's a balance between like being open to new experiences, but also kind of like holding your line and knowing what your boundaries are around work. And lastly, I think just like be really communicative. Yeah, like write emails, connect in any way you can, like follow up quickly, and just kind of like create that ongoing dialogue, because I think ultimately, like in work is one part, but like the relationship is so important in like for you and for whoever's hiring you. Like sometimes I think, yeah, at the end of the day, like people will hire you just because they want to work with you. You know, it's like a lot about your personality or about kind of what you offer as much as it is about like the work you're producing. It's both, of course, but yeah, and like Jesse kind of touched on this already, but just, yeah, in an interview, like you're interviewing them as well, like you're the prize too, you know, it's not just this one way, I'll like do anything, you know, to work with you. It's also like they're getting you, which is a positive and like great thing for them. So think about it that way.
Great, thank you, Jessica. That's a really nice way to put it. Does anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just say last summer, I didn't get any jobs, but I applied and it was very discouraging. But at the same time, I'm really glad I did it because it was a learning process and it forced me to do my portfolio. And I think ultimately taking those steps forward is going to serve you in the end. So yeah, don't be afraid.
Great. All right, well, I just want to thank all the panelists. I thank you for all of your thoughts and advice. I'm sure the students really appreciate it. Now we are going to move on to the Q&A, so Jenny can take that over.
Great, thank you guys for the incredible answers to our questions. We will now open it up to the Q&A discussion. So everyone, please feel free to turn on your videos and express your comments and questions in the chat, which we will ask on your behalf. You can also unmute yourself and ask your questions yourself. But we can start off the first question in the chat. So Shirley asks, what computer program and skills should we focus on to make ourselves more marketable, or even softwares to learn prior to enter an architecture program for undergraduates? And any other panelists can answer this.
I'm just gonna say this, take it however you want, but there's a huge emphasis at Sala on, at least in MArch, on using Rhino. And I've personally never worked anywhere that uses Rhino. I think I've worked for like 7 or 8 firms, and it's like SketchUp is huge. Like it's pretty often used and no one talks about it at Sala. So I'd encourage people to get into SketchUp. It's really effective software. And AutoCAD, you should just know generally, because even if your firm works in Revit, often consultants are going to be working in CAD and you're going to need to provide them underlays in CAD. So I mean, CAD and SketchUp are 2 skills that I think are really important to at least have a foundation in. And then, like, from my experience, the smaller typologies like single family homes, usually the firms are going to work in CAD and SketchUp, and then larger typologies, it's often Revit. So those are the 3 softwares I'd say are useful. And then obviously like Adobe Suite and rendering softwares, but just my take on like Rhino versus SketchUp. I have opinions on that, and that's what I think about it anyways.
I was going to say the exact same thing. Yeah, my experience has been using AutoCAD and also SketchUp. And I think, yeah, just diving into SketchUp is like very simple. I think it's not that hard to transition from Rhino to SketchUp, but it's a good thing to know. And I think, like, yeah, in the MLA program at least, yeah, like there's not a lot of emphasis on using AutoCAD. Vectorworks is also a program that a lot of landscape firms use. So I think having like a bit of familiarity with that makes sense. And also like the workflow from AutoCAD or Vectorworks like into rendering is a bit different than with Rhino. So I think just like having a bit of familiarity with that is a really good thing to do.
Amazing, that's great to know. Thank you. So next question is, what would you change about our architectural educational program if you could, as most of the panelists seem to have finished their schooling or are pursuing a master's?
I would make it shorter.
I feel like codes or bylaws are not covered enough because you have to really know your code. You really have to know the bylaws. I guess bylaws, like it really depends, but like code is so crucial. And well, right now I'm in my comprehensive studio and we're just like, oh, just like lightly touch on code. But like, it's just not enough. You really have to know the code.
I'd say to add to that, I think it's important to acknowledge that the study of architecture versus the practice of architecture are quite different. And I think you need to like accept that they're different, and really like what you're learning in architecture school is theory and design. And once you graduate, there's a whole other apprenticeship you have to do about like technical details, code, bylaws, all that kind of stuff. So I think just, I mean, acknowledging what it is and figuring out what's important to you. Like if you wanted to do more technical work in your university degree, you can if you want. So finding sort of what you want to get out of it, I think is important, because at least at Sala, you can sort of take multiple different directions in what you decide to focus on.
I think I would also, oh, sorry, Jessica, go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay. I was going to say that I think that I would also, like if I could change kind of the format of reviews and critiques to just kind of emphasize that like it's really a conversation about your work and not a panel of jurors. Like I don't like that it's called jurors sometimes, who are deciding whether your work is good or not, because once you actually get out into the field, like first of all, things are all very subjective. Second of all, your audience is usually not actually architects and other designers, it's regular people. So you can really just do your own thing. And I think similar to what Jesse was saying, like there's so many ways you can take architecture. Like you don't need to become like, unless you want to, the like capital A architect that you would think of first. Like you can go into academia, you can go into like so many other things. And so just like kind of, I think that like if I could, I would make the education a little bit less prescriptive, but and just like allow everyone to explore what they want to do, because there's so many ways you can take your education.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about reviews. Like looking at all of your work as being so in process. Like the work now that I'm showing to my supervisor, it's just like it doesn't look pretty, you know, at all for a long time. So like just getting really comfortable with just getting things down and knowing that the process is about like slowly turning it into something. It doesn't have to be right at all from the get-go.
Yeah, for sure. I think those are all great insights. So thank you guys. The next question is, how representative is our current school work and work ethic to our future professional workload and work ethic?
I think it varies based on where you'd work. And as Jessica said, when you go for an interview, you're also trying to figure out if you want to work there, right? Like, so that's like a decision I think you try to make for yourself and find work that fits into the kind of life you want. There's definitely, like a few years ago, there was definitely more, like a greater workload and a different lifestyle that architecture firms almost boasted of, but the industry is really moving towards a more balanced direction.
Yeah, I find like more progressive firms, they are really valuing the work-life balance, where like older firms, they will suck out your soul just like to get things down. They're like not really valuing your free time. So at least in my experience, it has been the case.
I think sometimes in the projects we do at Sala, like at the moment I'm doing it, I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing this. And it seems kind of irrelevant in terms of becoming a landscape architect in the future. But then a year later, looking back, it actually, oh, okay, there's some things I learned, and it's kind of, I stopped trying so hard at just trying to like do the right thing, and I'm just like going through the process, and it seems to be working out. So just trust the process, I guess.
Amazing. That's great to hear. Thank you. Next question is, what would you guys say is unique to UBC Sala from other schools, if you have any knowledge of other schools?
I got my bachelor's from Dalhousie, and now studying at UBC, I really value and appreciate the emphasis on sustainability. And it's so great how, I don't know, well, I guess it's BC who like implements step code, and it's like the thing that's happening in Vancouver more so than on the East Coast. And well, for example, Dalhousie versus UBC. At Dalhousie, we haven't covered much of sustainability at all, whereas at UBC, it becomes like one of the main design like leading things that lead your design.
Just to add to that, having also gone to Dal and Sala, I'd say like Dal is more interested in like form and resolving architecture and like the tectonics, whereas I think Sala is a little bit more about sort of the ideas and the implications and the larger sort of context of issues that you're addressing in your work. So I think, yeah, there's definitely schools that are more, I guess, like theory based and more practical based. I think Sala is definitely one that you can sort of lean in whatever direction you want, which is nice. I think like in some ways the pedagogy here is that there isn't a pedagogy.
Yeah, maybe I'll just echo Jesse's, because this is from a different school than Dal, and coming from Sala to GSD, I definitely did also notice that throughout my undergrad that there was more of an emphasis on like this greater concept that's making some type of commentary about the world around you. And this could just be because of the level of education. Like there I was in like the senior years, and now I'm like in the junior years of my master's, but it seems that now there's more of an emphasis on like, you know, like how does it look formally? Like, are you creating beautiful spaces? Like, are those plans like really interesting plans? And so it is like, I think the Sala is unique in that they really want you to think about like some type of like social or environmental or contextual impact with your design work.
Thank you. It's always really interesting to hear about other schools for sure. Next question, Muchi asks, do you guys have any tips for first year students who are wanting to get involved professionally, but don't necessarily have the expansive skill set of upper year students?
I think to answer that, like you probably have more skills than you think you do. And I think some of the skills, I think that, so like if you want to apply for work and you're feeling intimidated by it, I would say just go for it. I think we do things these days that are a little bit different than how things were done 10, 15 years ago, which might be who's hiring you. And my experience, they're usually pretty impressed. So yeah, I just wouldn't worry about that too much and go for it. And then like, there'll be a learning curve for sure, but that's good. Then you'll just be more equipped next time you go for a job.
Yeah, I want to encourage you with, like I got my first internship at HCMA when I was in my first year of the environmental design program. So I couldn't have been less experienced, and I'm still useful at that firm. And there's different interns, especially if it's a bigger, like maybe if it's a small firm with like 4 people and they have a budget for 1 intern, it might be a little bit tougher to get your foot in the door there. But if it's a firm that's like a medium to large size, they usually hire more than one intern, and they do different things. There was people there who were doing their thesis at the time. And so like those were the people who were going to pump out those like actual like construction drawings, not me, but like you are going to be able to contribute like really great ideas. You might be able to like help modeling, or just like if there's so many little things to be done in a firm, and like just being in that environment will give you such great experience. So don't be discouraged, definitely apply because it's possible.
Just to echo Tosin's point, I'd highly recommend doing a co-op or looking for work just in the summer, because for one, it's like a fixed amount of time. So you don't have to commit somewhere long-term. Even if you don't like it, it's okay. You'll learn more about what you do and don't like. So it's a great way to sort of test things out. You can try different offices, different sizes, depending on how much time you have, like how many semesters you're doing kind of thing. It just lets you have also some experience when you graduate, so it's not so daunting, and you're not just like, okay, I'm going to start a job that I don't know anything about now. So it just gives you a bit more confidence and ability to sort of know what you're looking for.
It's also kind of expected that you don't know everything, and in some cases they even assign you a mentor who will be able to like teach you things and guide you through the challenges that you might have. So definitely, like as long as you're passionate about the thing that you are doing and like wanting to learn, I think they would just appreciate that.
Great, thank you guys for advice. I think that was amazing, great advice, even for me as an undergrad student, as an upper year. I think I really appreciate what you guys have said. Next, Shirley asked, what kind of projects were you doing when you first started working in the professional world? And she also says, thank you for all your answers.
I started at really, really, really bad offices, like one person, and they were like, in one case, I wasn't even paid, but eventually I kind of like step by step started getting into better and better firms. So I don't know, maybe it's not a good advice. Maybe someone has a better advice, but like me having that not so good experience, at least it allowed me to get better experience later on. Because I had like something on paper that said that I did have that experience. Yeah, I'm looking forward to hear someone else's experience.
Yeah, I started at a really small firm. And what's nice about really small firms is you kind of get to try everything. And usually there's a lot that needs done in every aspect. So like could be like managing social media and then working on projects and like all these different things. You're kind of there to pick up some slack if you're just like a new intern. So it's good. It's a lot of work, but you do get a lot of different experiences. And it does kind of feel a little bit random sometimes if you're just like doing the little extra bit of work that someone doesn't get to, but you do get to see kind of every bit of the process, which is nice. So that was my experience.
I had a similar experience to Emily, where I started at like a 4 or 5 person firm. So I was fortunate to be basically just thrown in the deep end and having to do sort of all parts of projects, which can be super terrifying and you're usually never ready for it. But then when you get down the line, you realize how much you learned. Depends on the size of the firm too. Like I know you could start at a larger firm and be doing, people talk about like just doing door schedules and things like that. I've never been like stuck having to do something like that, but I suppose it's possible where if you're at a larger firm, you become more sort of task oriented rather than like project oriented. But also if you start at a larger firm, you'll probably have a lot more insulation around you. So you're not going to be having to make really hard decisions as often. You'll have people that you can sort of lean on. Whereas smaller firms, sometimes you just have to make decisions that you know nothing about and hope that it works out. But they're both great ways of learning.
Yeah, I found my first kind of tasks were basically like putting together presentations and that kind of thing, and just like drafting up concept plans, base plans, you know, just like kind of doing the nitty gritty organization kind of stuff. And then I found, yeah, pretty quickly started getting more into like drawing details and doing construction drawings and kind of starting to contribute to design a little bit from my experience, like with planting or material choices. So yeah.
Great, thank you guys for sharing. Surabhi actually has to step out, but we will continue to answer questions until 7:30. But thank you so much, Surabhi, for being one of the panelists. We really appreciate you taking your time to be a part of our discussion. Yeah. All right, I'll just move on to the next question. So Adam asked, should we be trying to supply a portfolio for applications?
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Oh yeah, for sure. Adam asked, should we be trying to supply a portfolio for applications? And he's a first year undergrad student.
I would say yes. Like, yeah, I think that you definitely have to, even if it's like, it doesn't need to have, if you don't have them, like it doesn't need to have like properly line weighted, like proper convention architectural drawings in it, but you should definitely be showing how you think and some of your creative process.
You should just in general always have a portfolio ready. Like that's like your best tool to represent yourself at all times. Like if you apply somewhere, you want to send them your portfolio and maybe they're not even hiring, but they just love your work so much that they need to give you a job. So yeah, I'd really stress just always having a nice up-to-date portfolio. And when I say nice, I mean it should just represent you. Like don't try and put stuff in there that's not you or your skill set or what you're interested in, because it's not going to work out as well. Like it'll show if you're interested in the work and the things you're doing. So really gear it towards your style, like everything from font choice to layout to the work you show and how you curate your pages. It's all some kind of representation of you and your design interests.
Okay, amazing. Thank you guys for sharing. I think we're getting close to the end. So does anyone have any pressing questions they would like to ask? Feel free to unmute yourself as well. No? Okay, amazing. So we really appreciate all the panelists here for taking the time out of your day to talk about remote working and issues that we are facing presently today. It's been a great discussion and really appreciate you all for sharing your personal experience and all the amazing advice. So big thank you to you all, and we wish you the best of luck in your coming endeavors. Thank you for everyone who joined as well, and hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the week.
Thank you for having us and nice chatting with everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Oh yeah, I will end it. Sorry guys.